The vast city of Zithera shimmered beneath three suns, its towers spiraling toward the sky like crystalline needles. Streets of polished metal reflected the sunlight in 1,000 colors, and airships hovered silently between the spires, carrying citizens in flowing robes of light fabrics. The city was alive with motion, voices, and the subtle hum of technology that no human could yet understand fully. To outsiders, Zithera seemed perfect, a jewel of the galaxy, and for the royal sisters who ruled there, it was a stage for their pride and cleverness. Lyria, the eldest, walked along the balcony of her palace with the grace of someone who knew she was the most beautiful being in the room, and often in the room beyond. Her eyes, violet like crushed gemstones, sparkled as she noticed a group of courtiers bowing in her presence. Saphira, the middle sister, was more unpredictable. Her hair was silver, glinting with a faint energy that pulsed like the heartbeat of Zithera itself. She leaned against a railing, smirking at the small mistakes of a young clerk below. Vela, the youngest, rarely restrained her sharp tongue. Her amber eyes scanned the courtyard, looking for amusement and finding it easily in anyone less perfect than herself. Their laughter had become part of the court's rhythm, a sound that many feared as much as they admired. Anyone who dared to approach the sisters had to endure teasing, riddles, or a carefully designed insult meant to display the sisters' superior wit. And today, as the wind carried the scents of alien flowers and the hum of engines, a new visitor arrived. His ship was small, modest, and clumsy by Zithurian standards. It bounced across the landing platform, sparks shooting from the undercarriage. Humans were rare in the galaxy, considered simple and fragile. Most Zithurians didn't expect much from them. The human stepped out. His name was Kale. He was tall by human standards, with strong features and dark hair slightly tousled. His clothing, while simple, was clean and practical. He carried no visible weapons, no signs of great wealth, and no extraordinary technology. He looked around, absorbing the city with a quiet curiosity that was entirely human. He did not bow in the elaborate manner Zithurians expected, and he did not fidget under their stare. The sisters noticed him immediately. "Is that really a human?" Vela whispered to her sisters, though her voice carried the edge of disbelief. "He dares to step into our city without proper respect," Saphira said with a grin. "How amusing." His stride was calm, measured, as if he knew he belonged anywhere in the galaxy. A minor security drone hovered near him, scanning his ship, but Kale waved his hands and spoke words in a language the drone recognized, shutting it down temporarily. Zithurians who watched were surprised. Humans were not supposed to understand alien technology so quickly. The sisters were intrigued but did not yet show it. They descended to the landing area to meet him formally. Kale's voice, when he spoke, was steady. "Greetings, I am Kale of Earth. I come in peace to learn and exchange knowledge with your people." "Do you even know the first thing about Zithera, human?" Courtiers whispered and some laughed along, but many were unsure. Kale had not flinched. He did not bow or retreat. The first challenge came quickly. A small holographic device appeared from the floor. It shimmered, displaying a puzzle, a combination of mathematics, logic, and Zithurian cultural knowledge. Anyone failing the puzzle would trigger a small shock, harmless but humiliating. Humans rarely had the mind for alien puzzles. The sisters exchanged knowing looks. "Watch him fail," Vela said. Kale knelt, examining the puzzle carefully. His fingers moved over it slowly, deliberately. He murmured to himself in a soft human language, thinking through each step. The sisters leaned closer, eager to see him falter. But then, in a surprising move, Kale pressed a sequence of buttons and whispered a command. The puzzle glowed green. It opened. The shock never came. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some courtiers gasped. The sisters' mouths fell slightly open in surprise. Kale stood, calm and smiling. "It was a matter of observation," he said simply. Lyria frowned but could not hide her curiosity. "You solved it, without even knowing our language fully." Whispers ran through the crowd. Humans were not supposed to be clever. They were supposed to be amusing at best. The king of Zithera, observing from above his throne room, leaned forward. His eyes narrowed as he studied Kale. There was a spark in the human's mind that reminded him of Zithera's greatest thinkers. It was unusual, unpredictable, and valuable. The next trial was social. The sisters led Kale to a formal dinner, with dishes that changed flavor based on the eater's emotions, and etiquette that was impossible for anyone unfamiliar with Zithurian customs. The sisters whispered instructions to each other, confident that Kale would fail spectacularly. Yet Kale navigated the dinner with a mix of charm, honesty, and careful attention. He apologized where he should, praised where it was deserved, and laughed naturally at jokes that required wit rather than alien tradition. Saphira tried to trick him by offering a dish that tested telepathic sensitivity. Kale held the dish, studied it carefully, and commented on the flavor using his human senses, revealing a truth about the dish's imbalance that no Zithurian had noticed. The sisters' surprise grew. Their private mocking turned into grudging respect, though they did not admit it aloud. The audience, too, noticed Kale was not just surviving in their world, he was navigating it better than some natives. The final test for the day was subtle. The sisters watched as Kale moved through the corridors of the palace, where traps, social pitfalls, and subtle insults were set for him. A young courtier attempted to trip him with a confusing set of formal words. Kale smiled, repeated the words back in his own clear way, and exposed the clerk's errors, leaving the courtier embarrassed instead. The sisters exchanged glances. Lyria muttered almost to herself, "He adapts unlike any human we have seen." Most humans fail to even survive Zithara's court, let alone thrive. And perhaps the courage to face ridicule without losing sight of what is right. He had shown insight, patience, and understanding, a combination rarely seen in any alien, let alone a human. The king's eyes glinted with an idea, one that made the sisters tense immediately. A plan was forming in his mind, a plan that would challenge the sisters' arrogance and pride. He would summon them tomorrow, he thought, and Kale would remain at the center of the court. For now, though, the human had earned a small victory, respect. Not from all, not yet, but enough to shift the balance of power, perception, and intrigue in Zithara. The sisters, once certain of their superiority, now faced a puzzle of their own, one that required more than mockery to solve. And so, under 3 alien suns, Kale walked through the luminous halls of Zithara, unaware that his presence had already begun to alter the course of the city's history. The sisters would learn soon enough that humans were not as weak, clumsy, or simple as they assumed. The first day had ended, and with it, the laughter of the sisters had faded into something quieter, curiosity. A human had entered their world, survived its tests, and shown a mind and courage that no one expected. Tomorrow, the true challenge would begin. The morning sun rose over Zithara, scattering light across the city like molten crystal. Kale stood on the balcony of the guest quarters, gazing at the sky, listening to the hum of engines and the distant chatter of the marketplace below. The first day had tested him, but he had passed. Yet he could sense that the real trials were only beginning. The court was not forgiving, and the royal sisters, Lyria, Saphira, and Vela, had not forgotten the sting of his small victories. Soon, a summons arrived, delivered by a shimmering drone that hovered silently beside his shoulder. Kale read the message. He was to report to the king's chamber immediately. He took a deep breath, adjusted his robes, and walked through the palace corridors, his steps echoing softly in the high ceilings. Each wall shimmered with holographic art depicting Zithara's greatest victories, most of which Kale studied curiously as he passed. The throne room was massive, a dome of crystalline metal that refracted sunlight into colored beams. The king of Zithara sat at the far end, his form tall, regal, and imposing. The sisters flanked him, their expressions a mixture of pride, irritation, and something unreadable, curiosity. Kale bowed respectfully. "Human," the king said, his voice deep and resonant, echoing slightly in the vast chamber. "You survived your first day in Zithara. That is unexpected. Few would manage it, and fewer still with grace. That is exactly what I wish to test. You see, I have a challenge for you, one that will determine your place in this court. But it is not a challenge you face alone. The royal sisters, your most vocal critics, will act as your guides, or your obstacles should you fail." The idea of being forced to cooperate with someone they had mocked so freely offended them deeply. Vela's voice dripped with disbelief. "You mean he must rely on us? The outcome is not for me to decide. It is for him to earn. It will be tested in ways you have not imagined. Humans think themselves clever, but cleverness alone does not survive Zithara's court." Kale's assignment was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in practice. Identify weaknesses in Zithara's defense strategies and suggest improvements. Lyria whispered to Saphira and Vela, confident that Kale would fail spectacularly. "He has no knowledge of our history, no experience with telepathy or spatial computation. Watch him stumble." He did not understand every nuance immediately, but he studied patterns, relationships, and inconsistencies. His human mind approached the problem differently, less rigidly, less bound by tradition. Where Zithurians thought in centuries-long strategies, he thought in practical adaptability. Hours passed. The sisters watched in growing frustration. Kale asked questions, listened carefully to their explanations, and slowly pieced together a plan. At the end of the day, he presented recommendations that corrected long-standing oversights in supply routes, communication channels, and defensive positions. His suggestions were simple yet elegant, blending human pragmatism with careful observation of Zithurian culture. Saphira's lips pressed together. "I did not expect this." The sisters brought Kale to a formal gathering with ambassadors from neighboring worlds. Zithurians had a reputation for cunning negotiations, often relying on subtle mind games, hidden motives, and the threat of force. The sisters expected Kale to fail, to embarrass himself publicly, to confirm their belief in human inferiority. Instead, Kale listened. He asked questions politely, noted cultural cues, and offered honest, insightful suggestions. When one ambassador attempted a sly deception, Kale responded with calm reasoning that exposed the ruse without confrontation. Zithurians and aliens alike murmured in surprise. The sisters were furious privately but could not deny the outcome. Saphira leaned toward Lyria. How is he doing this? He has no telepathy, no centuries of training. They tested him socially, placing him in situations designed to humiliate him. Complex etiquette, alien foods that reacted unpredictably, and riddles meant to mock his human reasoning. Kale navigated each with grace, patience, and subtle humor. He did not condescend, nor did he attempt to mimic Zithurian arrogance. Instead, he used honesty and observation, qualities few aliens expected to be valuable. The sisters began to feel an unfamiliar emotion, respect. But they could not admit it yet. Pride made their voices sharp, their comments biting. Yet each time Kale responded calmly and cleverly, it only emphasized their own mistakes. Even the minor victories Kale achieved had consequences. Lower-ranking courtiers, previously overlooked, began to notice him. They admired his intelligence and courage, whispering among themselves about the human who had turned the court's expectations upside down. The sisters, once untouchable in their influence, found themselves sharing the spotlight, and not in a way they controlled. By evening, the king called them all back to the throne room. He had observed Kale's progress and the subtle change in the sisters' behavior. "Human," he said, his deep voice echoing, "you have learned much in one day, yet the true challenge begins tomorrow. The court has seen your skill, but it has also seen your character, and the character of the royal sisters will also be tested." "I am ready, Your Majesty." Cooperation is not optional. The court will watch every action. Failure to succeed or to respect one another will have consequences. Kale left the throne room quietly, walking through halls that felt both vast and intimate. He reflected on the day, the challenges he had faced, the respect he had earned, and the subtle shift in the sisters' attitudes. He realized that survival in Zithra required more than intelligence. It required patience, observation, and the ability to inspire others, qualities he now had to cultivate even further. The sisters, meanwhile, gathered privately. Their voices were low, filled with frustration and disbelief. "He thinks differently. He adapts," Saphira said, pacing. "Do not underestimate him," Lyria warned, her eyes sharp. "He is human, and humans are unpredictable." Stars sparkled above the city, and the hum of engines faded into the distance. The human had survived the first day, earned respect, and shifted the court's perception. The sisters were no longer certain they could mock him without consequence. And the king smiled faintly, knowing that the stage was set for a trial that would reveal more than skill. It would reveal character, resilience, and perhaps something no one had anticipated, the strength of humanity. Kale's first day had ended, but his journey had just begun. Tomorrow, the true test awaited. And in the corridors of Zithra's palace, the air buzzed with anticipation, for the human, for the sisters, and for the story that was only beginning to unfold. The sun rose pale and distant over Zithra, painting the crystalline towers in soft shades of gold and silver. Kale had spent the night preparing, reviewing what he had learned the previous day. He understood the sisters better now, not just their cleverness, but their pride and how deeply they valued control. Today, he would face a trial far more difficult than any puzzle or diplomatic game, their direct opposition. The three sisters gathered in the main hall before Kale arrived. Lyria paced, her violet eyes narrowed. "We cannot let him succeed," she said quietly. "He has already embarrassed us in the court and outperformed every task the king has given him. We must ensure he fails before this day is over. He can be outwitted. They greeted him with smiles that did not reach their eyes, a polite courtesy masking intent. Kale had learned quickly that on Zithra, appearances could be misleading. He bowed slightly and said, "Good morning. I trust we are ready for today's challenges. Today, you will face trials designed to reveal your limitations." The human's task was simple in theory: navigate the garden while completing a series of challenges that tested observation, memory, and reasoning. Yet the sisters had already prepared several obstacles. Lyria created illusions in the holographic display embedded in the garden's floors. Saphira positioned mechanical devices to mislead Kale's senses. Vela whispered distractions to courtiers who would inadvertently confuse him. Kale began his path through the garden, calmly noting the false cues and distractions. He observed carefully. The plants that seemed to change shape were holograms. The subtle shifts in light revealed hidden sensors. He adapted his steps, keeping his focus. Each trap the sisters had designed he either bypassed or used to his advantage. At one point, a mechanical vine lunged toward him, triggered by a sensor meant to trip him. Kale did not panic. He stepped aside and pressed a panel on the vine, disabling it. A small crowd of watchers gasped. The sisters' eyes widened. How does he see these things so quickly?" Saphira whispered. "He studies patterns, not appearances," Lyria replied, though her voice trembled with frustration. "He adapts faster than any Zithurian would expect." The sisters attempted to mislead him with false data, but Kale noticed inconsistencies, pointing them out politely. He corrected errors, explaining improvements in ways that even the youngest courtiers could understand. The sisters' annoyance grew. They were used to controlling every lesson, every challenge. Now they had to follow Kale's reasoning and adjust their own guidance to match his insights. Their mockery had lost its power. He was learning and teaching at the same time. By mid-afternoon, the sisters had shifted tactics. Instead of trying to trip him directly, they tried to confuse him socially. They invited him to tea in a floating pavilion where every conversation contained subtle traps, hidden meanings, and polite insults meant to expose ignorance. Kale listened carefully, responding with calm intelligence. When Vela hinted at a secret weakness in the king's council, Kale asked politely for clarification, showing that he understood the intent but avoided confrontation. When Saphira tried to provoke him with a veiled insult about his physical strength, Kale responded with humor, deflecting the attempt while maintaining respect. The sisters exchanged frustrated glances. Each attempt to make him fail instead highlighted his skill. He was learning quickly, observing carefully, and navigating their tricks with patience and subtle cleverness. Lyria finally spoke, her tone quieter than usual. "He adapts faster than we anticipated. Perhaps we underestimated humans. If he survives the games of skill and mind, perhaps the next test will challenge him in ways we cannot prepare for." Humans were unpredictable, and Kale's calm, adaptable mind made him a rare specimen. As the sun began to dip toward Zithra's horizon, the sisters orchestrated their most daring challenge yet. They led Kale to a ceremonial chamber where a simulation of an invasion had been prepared. Holographic enemies, patrol routes, and supply lines created a complex scenario meant to test strategy, coordination, and leadership. The sisters whispered instructions to confuse him, conflicting advice, hidden hazards, and false information. Kale carefully listened, questioning details and observing patterns. He quickly realized that the sisters were attempting to sabotage him. But instead of panicking, he adapted. He created a new plan using their advice selectively, blending human ingenuity with the knowledge he had gained from them. The simulation began. Kale moved units across the holographic battlefield, predicting enemy movements with intuition and careful calculation. He directed defenses, coordinated supply routes, and adjusted strategies in real time. The sisters watched, astonished. Every time they tried to mislead him, he used the situation to strengthen his position. By the end of the simulation, Kale had completed the exercise flawlessly. The enemies were defeated, supply lines secured, and the court observers whispered in awe. The sisters' faces were pale with shock and frustration. He actually succeeded," Vela muttered under her breath. Saphira pressed her lips together. "And adapted every trick we used. How is this possible?" "Human," he said, his deep voice echoing, "you have faced challenges beyond those I expected. You have proven intelligence, adaptability, and courage. But the trial is not over. You must now earn the trust of the royal sisters themselves, for that is the true measure of worth in this court. Trust was not something they gave lightly, and the king's challenge implied that Kale's future in Zithra depended on winning it. After the king left, the sisters gathered in a private chamber. Their expressions were tense, filled with a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and something else, admiration they could not admit. "He has survived every challenge," Saphira said quietly. "Every test we devised, he adapted and succeeded. This is remarkable and infuriating. He may be clever, but can he understand us? Can he understand the court, our intentions, and the subtle dynamics of Zithra? That is what we will test next." He had survived, yes, but he understood that the road ahead was far more complex. Intelligence alone would not suffice. Patience, observation, empathy, and careful strategy would be essential. He paused near a glowing fountain, watching water shimmer in impossible colors. The city around him was alive, a mixture of beauty, danger, and opportunity. He realized that the sisters were not merely obstacles. They were teachers, rivals, and potential allies. Understanding them would be key to surviving Zithra and earning the respect and trust of its court. As night fell over the crystalline city, Kale felt a quiet determination growing within him. He had faced ridicule, sabotage, and impossible challenges, and had survived. He had proven himself capable, adaptable, and brave. But the next trials would be harder. The sisters' mockery might turn into something more deliberate. They would test his character, patience, and strategic skill like never before. Yet Kale did not fear this. Humans were resilient, adaptable, and capable of extraordinary feats when faced with challenge. He had already proven that one human could hold his own in the court of Zithra, and he would continue to prove it, one clever solution, one careful observation, and one act of courage at a time. In the quiet of the palace, the sisters watched him from a distance, their expressions complicated. For the first time, they could not mock freely. The human had shown them something new. A mind unbound by tradition, a courage unshaken by ridicule, and a patience that matched their cunning. Tomorrow they would have to face him again, and they knew, though they would never admit it, that he was no ordinary human. Kale was already changing the way Zithra saw humanity. And the court, buzzing with whispers and speculation, waited eagerly to see what would happen next. The morning light spilled over the spires of Zithra, casting long shadows across the city's crystal streets. Kale stood on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the city that had grown strangely familiar in just a few days. The lessons of the sisters, their puzzles, their traps, their mockery, had tested him, honed his mind, and strengthened his resolve. He knew the next challenges would be even harder, and yet he felt a quiet confidence. Humans thrived in adversity. That had been proven time and again. A sudden commotion in the palace courtyard drew his attention. Courtiers rushed past him, whispering urgently. Kale descended quickly, moving through the halls with careful observation. When he reached the courtyard, he saw the cause of the alarm. A fleet of alien ships had appeared on the horizon. They hovered silently, massive and dark, sending ripples of fear through the crowd. The king appeared on the balcony above, his expression serious. "Kale," he called, "this is no ordinary challenge. An enemy fleet approaches Zithra. They are the Thalnari, a rival empire seeking to seize our city. Your abilities will now be tested not only by puzzles and mockery, but by the reality of war. You will work with the sisters. Cooperation is not optional. We are expected to work with him in battle." For the first time, they realized that Kale's previous successes were not luck. They were proof of his mind and character. "Very well," Saphira said reluctantly. "We will work with you, but do not assume you can outsmart us in strategy. This is serious." The Thalnari ships were large, heavily armed, and moving with calculated precision. Kale studied their formations, noticing patterns that indicated predictable maneuvers. The sisters explained their usual defensive strategies, how the city's energy shields and orbital cannons could repel a frontal assault, how patrol drones could intercept small attacks, and how supply routes could be defended. Kale listened carefully, absorbing every detail, then suggested adjustments. "If we assume the Thalnari will expect a straight defense, we can use decoy tactics. Some drones can simulate movements of citizens, drawing attention while others prepare a counterattack. Predictability is more dangerous." As the enemy fleet drew closer, the tension in the city escalated. Citizens moved quickly, preparing defenses, and the sisters found themselves working in ways they had never before experienced. Kale treated them as partners, listening to their advice, blending their knowledge with his own insights and making decisions quickly and effectively. The first skirmish began near the outer perimeter. Thalnari ships launched probes and small attack vessels toward Zithara. The sisters expected chaos, expecting Kale to falter under pressure. Instead, he had anticipated the attack. Decoy drones moved first, drawing fire, while Kale directed the city's defenses to strike in coordinated precision. The sisters watched in awe as the human not only responded but predicted enemy movements. His timing was flawless, his choices careful yet bold. Each strike weakened the enemy without endangering the city's population. Lyria muttered, He can read the situation faster than we can even see it. Every tactic we might have used to confuse him, he uses to his advantage. Using a combination of decoys, rapid repositioning of drones, and strategic targeting of the enemy's supply lines, he forced the enemy ships into a trap. They collided with each other in confusion, suffering heavy losses without causing significant damage to Zithara. The court observers, who had gathered on terraces and balconies, erupted in whispered astonishment. The sisters themselves were stunned. Every plan they had attempted to use against Kale before had failed, and now they were witnessing him command a real battle with poise and brilliance. The king appeared again, his expression serious but with a hint of approval. Kale, he said, your strategy is sound. The city is safe for now, but the battle is not yet over. The Thalnari may return stronger, and your ability to lead, adapt, and inspire the court will be tested again. They had tried to mock, deceive, and challenge him, but now they saw clearly that he was not just clever. He was brave, insightful, and capable of leadership that inspired others. They realized that surviving in Zithara required more than skill. It required courage, humanity, and a mind that could see beyond tradition. The evening brought a temporary calm. The Thalnari fleet had retreated, but the threat remained. Kale and the sisters met in a private chamber to discuss the next steps. We underestimated him, Saphira said quietly. Not just his skill, but his mind, his calm under pressure, and his ability to unite people. I do not yet trust him completely, but I am beginning to see that he may be the key to defending Zithara. Not this one. They had mocked him, tried to sabotage him, and tested him to the limits, yet he had survived. Not only survived, but he had improved every situation he touched. And now, facing a real threat to the city, they had no choice but to cooperate, and in doing so, they were beginning to understand the value of human ingenuity and courage. As night settled over Zithara, the city hummed with quiet energy. Citizens whispered about the human who had led them through battle, about the sisters who had finally realized his worth, and about the king's wisdom in placing him in the court. Kale stood once more on a balcony, looking at the stars above. He knew the Thalnari would return, stronger and more determined. But he also knew something else. Humans thrived when faced with challenge. They adapted, learned, and used every obstacle as a stepping stone. And now, Kale had allies he never expected. 3 sisters who had once mocked him, who had once underestimated him, but who now saw him as more than a human. They saw him as a mind capable of shaping the future. Tomorrow would bring more trials, more tests, and perhaps more danger. Yet Kale felt ready. He had proven himself in thought, in strategy, and in courage. The city of Zithara would survive, and in doing so, it would see the strength of humanity, not just in one man, but in the qualities he represented: intelligence, bravery, resilience, and the ability to unite others. The sisters, standing silently behind him, realized that the human had changed everything. Their mockery was gone, replaced by cautious respect and a growing admiration. The king's plan had worked, not merely to test Kale, but to reveal what the sisters themselves had failed to see: that humans, though new to the galaxy, could rise to greatness, even among the stars. And in the quiet of the night, Zithara awaited the next chapter, a chapter in which Kale would continue to prove that humanity, clever, brave, and resilient, could not be underestimated. The morning sky over Zithara was pale and clear, the 3 suns casting long, shimmering reflections on the crystalline towers. Kale stood at the edge of the palace balcony, gazing across the city he had helped protect. The events of the past days had changed everything. He had faced mockery, complex puzzles, political intrigue, and even the threat of war. And he had survived every challenge. The sisters approached him quietly. Lyria's violet eyes were calm but thoughtful. Saphira's silver hair caught the sunlight as she studied him, and Vela's amber gaze held a mixture of admiration and curiosity. The tension that had existed when they first mocked him was gone, replaced by something deeper: respect. "We need to talk," Lyria said softly. "Not as instructors, not as rivals, but as equals. You have changed the way we see everything, our strategies, our priorities, and even ourselves. You have proven that your kind, humans, can rise to challenges no one expected. We see now what the king saw. Intelligence, courage, and the ability to adapt are not bound by species. To truly be part of Zithra, to earn your place here, you must face a challenge that tests the heart as well as the mind. Kale, he said, you have faced the trials of intellect and courage. You have endured mockery, solved puzzles, navigated diplomacy, and led Zithra through a real battle. Now, the final test is simple in form but profound in meaning. You must demonstrate that you can unite those who once opposed you, and that your presence brings strength and stability, not chaos. I understand. I will do my best. The king continued. Kale, to pass this trial, you must work with the sisters to resolve the city's final crisis. An old enemy, the Thalnari, has sent envoys demanding surrender. You must negotiate, protect the city, and ensure that Zithra remains strong. The court, the citizens, and the sisters will judge your actions. Fail, and the city may falter. Succeed, and your place among us will be secure. I will listen to your counsel, and together we will protect Zithra. He noticed that they assumed Zithra's leaders would act with arrogance or fear, underestimating the human at the center. Kale spoke first, his voice steady. I am Kale of Earth, representing Zithra. We do not seek conflict, but we cannot surrender what we have built. Let us speak openly, and find a solution that avoids unnecessary harm. Each time they attempted deception, he countered with clarity, exposing false assumptions without raising anger. The sisters whispered advice, and Kale listened. He incorporated their insights seamlessly, blending human reasoning with Zithurian knowledge. For the first time, the three sisters worked not to undermine him, but to support him, trusting his judgment completely. Hours passed. Negotiations stretched into the night. Kale remained patient, clear, and respectful. Slowly, the Thalnari envoys realized that their tactics were failing. They were facing not just cleverness, but fairness, foresight, and the unshakable calm of someone who inspired confidence. Finally, Kale presented a plan: trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and clear boundaries that protected Zithra's sovereignty while offering the Thalnari benefits they could not refuse. The envoys consulted among themselves, reluctantly agreeing. The city was safe, the threat neutralized, and the king's expectations fulfilled. The sisters turned to Kale, a mix of relief and admiration on their faces. Lyria's voice was soft but firm. You have not only proven your mind and courage, but your character. You have earned our trust fully. I respect you. You have earned not only your place here, but the respect of those who once mocked you. Today, Zithra sees what humanity is capable of. Kale stood beside the sisters, feeling the weight of achievement but also humility. He had done what few humans could, but he knew that the real triumph was in unity, understanding, and mutual respect. The city was safe, the court was impressed, and the sisters, once his greatest critics, were now his allies and friends. The king continued, his voice carrying through the hall. Kale, the time has come for the final act of this trial. You have proven that humans can rise to greatness. You have earned the opportunity to join our family fully, to bind yourself to Zithra not only through skill, but through partnership. The decision is yours and that of the sisters. No longer were they mocking or doubtful. They had seen his mind, his heart, and his courage. They trusted him, and in doing so they had accepted him as an equal. I accept, Kale said, not for power nor for glory, but to continue building a future where humans and Zithurians can thrive together, to protect the city, its people, and its values. Together, let the court remember this day. This is the future. They had once mocked the human. They had doubted him, tested him, and sought to challenge him. But through every trial, he had proven that humanity could rise to greatness, even in the midst of alien worlds, complex courts, and threats from the stars. Kale smiled, knowing this was not the end of challenges, but a beginning. Humanity had proven itself in Zithra, and the city would be stronger for it. Together with the sisters, he would continue to protect, innovate, and inspire. And somewhere in the distant sky, beyond Zithra, the stars waited for humanity to rise even higher.